And our program guest this morning is the Workplace Relations Minister, Bill Shorten. But before then, we'll see what the Sunday papers are up to this morning. And keeping in mind what's going on in Canberra with Peter Slipper and Craig Thompson, Phil Curry, there's, I guess, some questions about consistency raised in the papers this morning. A couple of Liberal MPs are mentioned on the front pages. We'll start with the often controversial Liberal Senator Bill Heffernan.
Yeah, Barrie Bill, the unreconstructed New South Wales Senator from June, he's been accused at a meeting of the Liberal Party on the Central Coast. There was a branch meeting up there back on May 3rd. There's a bit of anger going on about the headquarters parachuting in candidates in Craig Thompson's seat and the one next door of Robertson. And at some stage, Heffernan, who was up there, took aside a staffer named Ray Carter, allegedly, we must say.
According to the staffer.
We tend to use that word with everything we say now, don't we? Hit him forcefully and then said in a low voice, "I didn't know you were a poofter." Now, this has caused untold anxiety and anger, and this story started getting rumours of this started circulating late Friday evening about this, and it's come out in the Sunday papers in all its glory today. Now, it does have a serious edge, of course, because Labor's into it like a rat up a drain pipe. Craig Emerson, I think.
Yeah, Craig Emerson has tweeted overnight. He says, will Tony Abbott use the tainted vote standard he applied to Craig Thompson or Labor's standard of presumed innocence?
Yeah, so exactly. Did Bill do this? Or didn't he do it? And until we find out either way, should he be allowed? You know?
It's not a civil case at this stage, though. It's just a complaint that he has made to the Liberal Party, and he wants the party to investigate.
That's right. And Mark Neame, the state director, said we're looking at it. The state executive is looking at it. So it's not, you know.
And as it happens, Brian, at this time a Liberal state member in Victoria is mentioned as well, which has some similarities, I suppose, to the Craig Thompson issue.
Well, more in some ways, I suppose, to speak to the Speaker, Peter Slippers, because it's about the misuse of, not travel allowances as such, but the misuse of a taxpayer-supplied car and fuel cards for use in his private business. That, again, is the allegation. But Ted Baillieu, the Liberal Premier of Victoria, has ordered a probe into it, and it's a knife-edged thing that he's probing because, in many ways, politically it mightn't matter, except that he's already only got two votes clear as a majority. If he loses this bloke, then it's back to equal numbers in the State House in Victoria.
And these sorts of issues, OK, you're using the allegation is that he used his car for business purposes and on interstate trips and whatever. If there wasn't a minority government or a knife-edge government, these things have been swept under the carpet for years. You know, politicians don't want to make a fuss about it because, Misha, there's a long list of people who are on the edge when it comes to this sort of thing.
I think that's right, that historically some people have had allegations or issues just sort of moved to one side because they're not numerically significant in a particular parliament, because parties generally like to hold on to people even if there may be some prima facie wrongdoing. That's their instinct, to kind of club together and protect the tribe. And so it's in the circumstances of these very finely tuned hung parliaments, or, you know, single seat majority parliaments, that you actually start to get a spotlight applied and a whole new standard of pressure and expectation for action being applied.
Exhibit A being Craig Thompson. I mean, you know, that stuff was written, those allegations, 3 years ago, April 2009. Yep. No one gave a damn, and no one gave a damn until after the election, and there was a hung parliament.
The pre-selectors didn't give a damn.
The voters didn't give a damn, they re-elected him.
But most importantly, the Labor Party branch in New South Wales didn't give a damn. We wouldn't be talking about Craig Thompson now if they had not pre-selected him for the 2010 election, and that was all written up in the Sydney Morning Herald at the time.
And Misha, on another area now involving Craig Thompson, and it's a grey area, but the Liberals, having demanded a statement from Craig Thompson for a long time, are now worried about the tabling of documents that might follow.
Yes, well, Christopher Pyne has made a few comments today in our paper, basically saying that their approach will be a very wary one about any move by Craig Thompson to table documents in his defence, because of this grey issue in the law about, if documents are tabled then in the Parliament, could they potentially not be used in any subsequent legal action that may or may not be brought. Anthony Albanese had quite a clever response to that, basically saying, well, consistency in these sorts of matters. So I think it's not even very clear whether there will be documents tabled, but it's an interesting thing for them to flag at this juncture ahead of him speaking tomorrow.
Yeah, well, Anthony Albanese was sort of saying, you finally come across to our point of view that there is a separation between the Parliament and and the law, and it ought to be done that way. And Phil, we've just had a budget, and yet we've got something that amounts to budget speculation within 2 weeks or so about this. Perhaps the government's looking at easing childcare costs.
There's a report in the Sunday Telly today by Sam Maiden, and they're floating a bit of extra assistance for childcare. Now, this government's been pretty good for childcare. They lifted that rebate from 30 to 50%, and it's not mean. It's one of the last things that's not means tested, so it's already a pretty good deal you get with childcare from the government. But now there are two options being floated to keep prices in check, because anyone who's got kids there knows it's expensive. One, subsidising the industry directly in return for a price agreement. The other one, just a bit more assistance to lower middle income families. Now it's something that'll maybe announced before the next budget, but it sounds just another cost of living overture from
amongst a whole raft.
Amongst a whole lot of these things.
I think we can file that one away for a while. And Brian, another poll showing that gay marriage isn't necessarily an issue that politicians should run a mile from.
This is a poll in the Herald Sun, or Sunday Herald Sun, showing that 50% of Australians surveyed are in favour of it, only 33% opposed, and 17% undecided. And the other figures of some consequence is that 75% of people think there should be a conscience vote on that, which of course at the moment the Liberals are not going to allow.
And just a late breaking story too, the independent senator from South Australia, Nick Xenophon, has now said that he, in certain circumstances, hypothetically, he would support a repeal of the carbon tax if Tony Abbott was to win the next election. Let's hear Nick Xenophon on Sky this morning.
I will support the repeal of the carbon pricing scheme, but you need to have an alternative in place. And you need to have an alternative in place because both the coalition and the government are both committed to the same emissions targets, a reduction in emissions by 2020. The question is, we need to have a sensible, robust debate in this country. What is the most effective way of reducing emissions in economic terms, in terms of getting your best environmental bang for your buck, in a sense? So the coalition previously commissioned the Frontier scheme. They need to have a good look at that.
So I guess, Phil, the significance of that is that there's been some talk as to can Tony Abbott really deliver? He says that he'll get rid of the carbon tax. Can he do it? This, I suppose, improves the odds. It
does. There's a more than even chance that Xenophon and John Madigan, the Victorian senator, could end up with a balance of power again after the next election if Labor and the Greens lose one or two each. Like Xenophon and Steve Fielding around the Senate before the last election. Now, what he's saying there, he'd support the repeal, but there's a fairly heavy caveat there. He's saying, it sounds like he wants this frontier economic system in place. Now, that's an alternative model Xenophon and Malcolm Turnbull cooked up when Turnbull was trying to negotiate with Rudd, and it eventually hit the fence. So we probably need to hear whether he would, A, repeal the existing scheme without any guarantee of this alternative scheme, or he'd want an alternative scheme in place. Now, I can't see Tony Abbott rushing into a carbon price regardless of what the scheme, so it may not amount to anything, but if he's prepared to abandon it and take Abbott on his word that he'll do something down the track, it would be significant.
All right, well, that's the Sunday Papers, and now to our studio guest, the Workplace Relations Minister, Bill Shorten. And while he joins us, here's the Chairman of BHP Billiton, Jack Nasser, on what he thinks is wrong with the system.